Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, tonight we're going to be continuing with our series of shirim on the laughter of Yitzchak. And we've spoken about the rooting of redemption in the transformation that emerges with Yitzchak. Yitzchak represents the laughter that emerges when there is a sudden departure from that which was expected and a topsy-turvy expression of what was completely unexpected, which is the redemptive capacity to reveal goodness at the heart of all things. We spoke about finding life in the heart of death, finding chayim in the heart of what appears to be misa. Again, the sugyos hakashot that Yitzchak Avinu forces us to encounter. When we're learning about Avram Avinu, a person need not necessarily encounter the difficult terrain of what it means to be a human being. But it's specifically with the revelation of Yitzchak that things begin to emerge. Yitzchak was Machadish Yisurin. Yitzchak was the one who came to the world to teach Is Din Ve'is Dayan. A person living in this world is a person who's subject to difficulty. But on the other hand, we also know from every shir that we're discussing that all of the difficulty and the gvura and the severity and the concealment and the withdrawal associated with Yitzchak is also the very birthplace of that laughter that emerges in the future. And we said that the sugya of Yitzchak is mamish the sugya of tzimtzum, as we're learning in the shirim on Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern Shlita's Perush on the Maisa of Melech Anav, from Parshas Vayetze Tavshin Ayin Gimel. That Yitzchak as the tzimtzum, Yitzchak as the emergence of concealment, is the impossible paradox at the heart of all things, which is both presence and absence at once, as Rabbi Nachman describes, as other tzaddikim describe as well. But Rabbi Nachman makes this explicitly clear in the 64th teaching, where he discusses the impossibility of the tzimtzum. And ultimately, the tzimtzum is both a removal and a presence. It's like the locust whose exoskeleton emerges from within itself, which is the joke, which is why Arbe, the secret of tzimtzum, which is that the concealment itself is part and parcel of the revelation, and that the casing of the locust, which seeks to protect it, is in truth emerging out of the very thing that it's coming to protect, and the secret of Neyubei in and of itself. So too is the secret of Yitzchak, who contains the paradox within himself, the paradox of concealment and presence, the paradox of being up and down at once, of being dead and alive at once. And as we continue in the shirim, we're going to encounter novelty, we're going to encounter the possibility of renewal and hischadshus, which comes from the Yitzchak Avinu. We're going to talk about Torah, which is rooted in Mipi HaGvura, and Yitzchak Avinu. We're going to talk about the redemption, the transformation, Purim, all of the different sugyos, Lag BaOmer, everything that comes along with an attachment to Yitzchak Avinu. But tonight, what I want to discuss is not the deviation away from what we've been discussing, but rather more of like an edifying divestment. It's a slight shift away from the natural subject matter that we focus on for the sake of kind of rebuilding the foundations upon which the sugya is built on. Because on a certain level, it can be argued that the sugya of Yitzchak Avinu, the sugya of Yitzchak and the gevuros and the sweetening of those gevuros and the deep secret within Pnimius HaTorah, which is that we don't erase severity, we transform it, elevate it, and sweeten it in its root. It's not enough to get rid of the negative. It must be transformed to become a seed of good. The entire sugya of Hamtakas Adinim is the sugya of Yitzchak Avinu. But there's a way of looking where Yitzchak Avinu and that sugya is just one sugya amongst others in Pnimius HaTorah. But there's the Avram sugya, there's the Yaakov sugya, there's the Moshe, Aaron, David, Yosef sugya. But there's another way of looking where we realize that in truth, all there is the Yitzchak sugya. That all that exists in Pnimius HaTorah is the sugya of Yitzchak, is the secret of what Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov, the Talmud Mufak of the Gra, points out in his Perush on the Idrazuta, where he says explicitly that the entire tachlis of Pnimius HaTorah, the entire tachlis of Kabbalah, as it's referred, is really to be megala the secret of Mi Yimalel Gevuras Hashem. Who can come and understand the secret of Gevuras Hashem? Who can come and understand the secret of that which appears to be severe, that which appears to be a containing vessel, that which appears to be constrictive and limiting and concealing and dark, is in truth the very opposite of what one has imagined. That in truth, all of those acts of privation and removal and distance, and each person understands those synonyms on their own level, not only are they not as bad as we thought they were, but Ella Adara, but they are the very source of the chedva and the tainug and the schoik of l'asad level. The Leshem Shaval Chalaima has hundreds of places where he expresses this explicitly, how the Gevuros are the driving force behind Simcha, behind Schoik, behind Chedva, behind Oineg, behind any possible expression of goodness. And so it's not just that Yitzchak is a sugya within Pnimius HaTorah. Yitzchak is the sugya of Pnimius HaTorah. And it's not very difficult to see this explicitly. One particular place that we're going to focus on is the Kabbalah of the Arizal, or the Yitzchak Luria. And we said in the beginning of Shirim that Rabbi Nachman is associated with the name of Yitzchak. Rashbi dies with Rav Yitzchak. The Arizal, the last comments that he has with his Talmud Rav Yitzchak, is also Yitzchak. The Arizal is Yitzchak. The Baal Shem Tov is Makusher to the secrets of Yitzchak. Rabbi Nachman, all of the tzaddikim are connected to the secrets of Yitzchak. Mashiach is connected to Yitzchak. Mashiach is the revelation of Ki'ata Avinu, because it's only through Yitzchak that we're going to be Zocha. But by the Arizal, we find the expression of Yitzchak even more intensely. And I believe that what we're trying to say and what we're trying to show in the Shirim is that Yitzchak is not just a sugya b'fnei atzmo, separate from all other sugyos, but rather Yitzchak is the central point of the entire system, to be megala the schoik la'asid lavo. And therefore, if Yitzchak and his secrets are at the core of what we're trying to understand, in terms of redemption, in terms of undoing tzimtzum, v'chule, then we can use the Kabbalah of the Arizal as a raya, as a starting point to see how not only is the content based on Yitzchak, but the historical expression of Pnimius HaTorah in general, and the reality of a concept of Pnimius HaTorah is dependent upon the sugyos of Yitzchak. Now, what we'll start with is a klal that we've spoken about in the past from Rabbi Nachman brought down in Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman, which Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern Shlita makes a very big asik out of. And each zerem of Chasidus and each zerem of Torah will understand that final expression of the Torah in their own way. But in the line of the teachings of Rabbi Nachman and the Rebbe, we're going to focus on their mahalach, which is that there are 5 historical tzaddikim through whom the Torah is revealed throughout history. The Chamisha Yechidei Hadoros, the 5 singular ones, who represent not some better quality over other tzaddikim or some better behavior that allows them to be worthy of such a status, but rather they are ontological expressions of new layers of revelation within the unfolding of the Torah, which prior to them it was impossible to access, and after them it's fundamentally necessary for the movement towards the next step. The first stage of revelation was Moshe Rabbeinu, Raya Mehemna, and in truth, as the Rebbe points out, based on the Arizal, really all of the 5 tzaddikim are just fuller expressions of Moshe Rabbeinu, up to and including Mashiach Tzidkenu, which is the secret of Nishmas Moshe, as the tzaddikim tell us, Mashahaya Hushiyi as Roshei Tevos Moshe, and the association between Moshe and Mashiach is very clear. So in spite of the fact that they're really all Moshe, there are 5 gradations of Moshe. There's Moshe Rabbeinu, there's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, there is Rabbeinu Yitzchak Luria, the Arizal, there's Rabbeinu Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, and there's Rabbeinu Nachman ben Fega, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Again, without making any claim as to the role that other tzaddikim play in any of these constellations, but the example that we've given is that if these tzaddikim represent universes or solar systems, every other tzaddik represents planets and systems within the solar system. Both are fundamental and both need to feed in and through each other. But these 5 tzaddikim, the unfolding process of Torah, is as follows. Moshe Rabbeinu reveals the revealed Torah. He reveals Torah's Moshe, Bereishis, Shemos, Vayikra, B'midbar Devarim. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai comes along to reveal the nister within the Nigla. The Sefer HaZohar of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is rooted in utilizing the psukim of Torah's Moshe to uncover the secrets that live at the heart of each and every pasuk, as someone who has studied the Zohar HaKadosh sees immediately. The Arizal comes along and he reveals the revealed language of hidden Torah. So again, Moshe Rabbeinu reveals the revealed Torah. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai reveals the hidden meaning of revealed Torah. The Arizal reveals the hidden language of concealed Torah. The language of the Arizal, the system of the Arizal is mamish a system, it's a language, it's a mathematical reality, it's an ontological reality that needs to be understood. The writings of the Arizal contain the neshama within it, but ultimately when it's just being learned for the sake of studying a system, it can appear to simply be devoid of that inner content, God forbid, and therefore it be considered the simple meaning of the concealed Torah. And the Baal Shem Tov is the secrets of the Torah, meaning, again, Moshe Rabbeinu reveals revealed Torah. Rashbi reveals the concealed within the revealed Torah. Arizal reveals the revealed aspect of the concealed Torah. Baal Shem Tov, HaKadosh, and Rabbi Nachman come along to reveal the concealed aspect of the concealed Torah. These 5 stages of the unfolding of Pnimius HaTorah throughout the generations and all of their significant meanings that expand into infinite horizons, these 5 stages, like anything else, can be aligned with every other equation of 5 in the system of Kabbalah. The Shem Havaya is 4 letters plus the tip of the Yud, which makes it 5. The Neshama has Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. 5 levels to it. There are 5 worlds. There's Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. 5 is always the process, and even though you can look at it as if it's 4, in truth, every level of 4 includes within it a 5, which is bigger than the whole thing. As the Bnei Yissaschar tells, he brings an amazing, amazing Maisa in his Sefer Iger de Pirka, that there was a tzaddik who came to his Rebbe to be by him, and one of the missions that the Rebbe sent him on was to go buy a certain type of honey beer for the chevra who were sitting together. And this person, this chassid, says, I don't have any money. And the Gabbai gave him four coins. And he goes and he tries to buy this honey beer. And the owner of the stand says, I'm sorry, this costs 5 coins. And he says, all I have is 4 coins. And the person says, well, unfortunately, you can't get it. And he comes back to his Rebbe and he says, the Rebbe says, where's the honey beer? And he says, well, I needed 5 coins and I only had 4 coins. And what the Rebbe responded is that a Yid has to always know the secret of transforming 4 into 5. A Yid always has to understand the secret of transforming 4 into 5. And Zok the Bnei Yissaschar, that this is a secret of looking at the Shem Havaya, Yud K, Vav K, or Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Moshe Rabbeinu, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Arizal and the Baal Shem Tov, which appears to be 4, and uncovering the secret of the 5th within it, uncovering the highest level within it. So these 5 levels of Torah, of Moshe, Rashbi, Arizal, Baal Shem Tov, and Rabbi Nachman correspond to the 5 levels of the soul, to the 5 worlds, and they also correspond to the 5 partsufim. The 5 partsufim, which are already things that are revealed by the Arizal, as we're going to see, are as follows. Corresponding with the level of Keser is something referred to as the partsuf of Arich Anpin, or Atik Yoimin, something that we don't need to delve into fully right now, something we've touched upon and will Be'ezer Hashem touch upon at length in the future. After the partsuf of Keser, which is referred to as Arich Anpin, there's the partsuf of Chachma, which corresponds to the Yud of the Shem Havaya, which is referred to as Abba. It's a masculine expression of thought that emerges suddenly but doesn't last very long. It is a burst of inspiration where the thought is seen in its whole totality, like the level of Abba, that's Chachma, and that's associated with the Os Yud. The Os Hey represents Bina, which represents the parts of Ima. Just as Abba gives over potential towards Ima in order to open it up, in order to expand it, so too Chachma in its relationship with Bina is a burst of inspiration, which then undergoes a period of gestation in which something can form. The Nekuda, the vowelization associated with the world of Bina, is Tsere, because Tsere is the language of Tzior, it's the formation of things. The Nekuda associated with Chachma is Patach. It's patach, something opens up, and then it's tseire, that opening needs to now be dealt with and developed. And so Bina, we already know, is still associated with the loftiest of heights, but it's also the birthplace of severity. It's also the birthplace of intensity. It's what's referred to as dinin misabrin minei, that gvuros and minimization and concealment begin to emerge within the womb of Bina, in spite of the fact that it's still purified in its own self. That's why the name associated with Bina is the Shem Havaya. It's the four-letter name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which represents unbridled compassion and mercy. Yet at the same point, the nekudos, which imply the way that it is read, and reading is an act of expressing something from its internal, unactualized state into an expressed and externalized state, the nekudos of the Shem Havaya, of the world of Bina, are the nekudos of Eloikim, meaning to say that in truth, its essence is Rachamim, but it begins to be the birthplace of the potentiation towards separation and towards opposition and all of the different things that allow reality to take shape. So what we have so far is that, in accordance with this breakdown, Moshe Rabbeinu corresponds to the Kutzel Shel Yud, the simplest, uppermost point of the Yud, correspondent to the level of Keser, or the partsif of Arach Anpin. The Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, is associated with the Yud, with Chachma, which is the revelation of the Zohar HaKadosh. Chachma is the birthplace of possibility. And then we find that the Arizal is associated with the first Hey of the Shem Havaya, which is the level of Bina. And like we said, Bina is associated with this transitionary space between pure unity into what appears to be disunity for the ultimate joke of reality, as we're going to see. And then, just for the sake of completing the Shem Havaya in our kind of alignment here, based on the teachings of the tzaddikim, the fourth level is going to be the Os Vav of the Shem Havaya. That corresponds to the parts of Zer Anpin, which is the Adam themselves, which is emotional experience. That is the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. As we know, the Baal Shem Tov secret was Mi Besari Echazeh, from my own experience, I will behold HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, the Baal Shem Tov's Torah corresponds to the Vav. It's associated with Yaakov and Yosef. It's associated with the Vav HaChibur of the secret of Dveikus. And therefore, the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov is going to correspond to the parts of Zer Anpin, and the Torah of Rabbi Nachman, which is about Tefillah, which is about transforming Torah into Tefillah, which is about hisboidus, of learning to speak, how to use the mouth with one's own language, and understanding the deepest sense of what it means to live within Malchus. That's the Torah of Rabbi Nachman. So what we have is the 5 historic tzaddikim through whom the Torah is revealed as follows. The upper point of the Yud, which is Keser, is Moshe Rabbeinu. The Yud itself, which is Chachma, is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The Hey, which is Bina, is the Arizal. The Vav, which is Zer Anpin, is the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. And the Hey, which is Malchus, which is the lowest level, is Rabbi Nachman. For our purpose, what we uncover here is that the Gilui of the Arizal is associated with the world of Bina. That the expression of the Torah of the Ari is the expression of Bina of Pnimiyas HaTorah. Now, what is Bina? We know that Bina has certain halachos, and everything we've spoken about, everything that we tend to speak about is rooted in the place of Bina. Bina is the birthplace of the possibility of concealment. It is the birthplace of changes. It is the possibility of a hiddenness that blocks a revelation. It is the descent into anger. It is the descent into whatever emotional discrepancies we may find ourselves in. It is the place of tahara, which implies the possibility of tumah. It is the place of tshuva, which implies the possibility of falling away. It is, as Chazal describe expressly and explicitly, bina miklal d'ta'a. If a person says that they have understood something, if a person says that they have an understanding of something, the implication is that prior to their understanding, they had struggled with it and they had fallen. Because the expression of Bina, of Mevin Davar Mitoch Davar, what does Mevin Davar Mitoch Davar mean? As Chazal themselves describe the role of Bina. If a Davar is unified, if something is whole, like at the level of Chachma, then there's no distinction within a thing. The thing is what it is, and there's no distinction. It's a unified object. It's only from the perspective of Bina, which is the root of the Shnei Hafachim, of Elu ve'elu Divrei Elokim Chayim, which the Arizal teaches is the Torah of Bina, where it's these and those, because there's Tameh and Tahor. There's 49 gates of Bina which are Tameh, and 49 gates of Bina which are Tahor. Bina is always the splitting open into possibility, and therefore Bina is the secret of Mevin Davar Mitoch Davar. I'm dealing with a Davar. I'm dealing with something, and suddenly there appears to be something new that appears from without that thing. At first glance, shattering my assumption of a previously held unity, but at second glance, which we need for Yitzchak Avinu, we always have to look twice, like we said. Like the Sodi Sharm says, that it has to be a level of Re'ei Ra'inu, that in order to see the blessings associated with Yitzchak, you have to do a double take. That we're looking at a davar, and suddenly it's Mevin Davar Mitoch Davar. There's a splitting, there's a doubling, and now there's two things. But this multiplicity and this addition and this hosafa is also the birthplace of complication, of concealment. So Bina always operates this very kind of liminal experience, which is why Ramdu Vali, the Talmud Mufak of the Ramchal, says that Bina is a language of Bain. It's a language of in between. It's in between things. It's already engaged in kind of fissures and cracks and breaks, and the ability to return back from a place that I came from. So if the Arizal's Torah is associated with the level of Bina, the birthplace of Gevuros, the birthplace of severity, yet severity has yet to take on negativity, but rather it becomes the movement and the motivating factor behind multiplicity and growth and intensification. As the Rebbe Rashab writes, that the source of Gvura is in truth his Gabrus Ha'atzmius, an intensification of self. So then the entire Torah of the Arizal has to be associated with the concept of Bina. And in fact, we find this. We find this not only in the writings of the Arizal, in the way that the writings were formed, in the content of those writings, but also in the Arizal himself. Because let's first and foremost look at what we know about the tzaddik, the Giloi, Rav Yitzchak Luria, Ha'ari Hachai, the living Arizal, the Ari who revealed Olamois Chadashim for us, who through a Ruach HaKodesh that was karuv to Nevuah, and in certain circumstances is judged as Nevuah, that the light that the Arizal brought into the world was a light that did not exist in a revealed way prior to the Arizal. And as Rabbi Nachman says, before the revelation of a tzaddik, it's possible to get by without them. After the revelation of a tzaddik, it's impossible to survive without them. The Arizal has given life to Klal Yisrael. The life of Klal Yisrael, our willingness to tolerate difficulty, is rooted in our grasp of what the Arizal revealed to us, whether consciously or unconsciously. And so let's look at the Ari himself. The Arizal was born in Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh. Then, in order to develop into who he needed to develop into, the Arizal was sent to Mitzrayim to be by his uncle. So the Ari was yored to Mitzrayim, and as the Ari himself says to Rav Chaim Vital, that he's associated with the sphere of Yesod, which is connected to Yosef, that the whole process of the Arizal's descent into Mitzrayim is very much reflective of Yosef HaTzaddik's descent into Mitzrayim, in order to clarify the darkness, in order to reveal the lights that are hidden in darkness. And so the Arizal starts off in Yerushalayim. He goes to Mitzrayim, where he sits on the banks of the Nile River, being mizboided yoimim v'layla, being mishamesh by who? Being a Talmud of Rav Betzalel Ashkenazi. Rav Betzalel Ashkenazi was the Shita Mekubetzas. Legend has it that the Arizal himself wrote the non-existent Shita Mekubetzas on Maseches Chulin. How to gather all of the sparks, the Shita Mekubetzas within Chulin itself, within Gashmias. And it's not coincidental. One of the Iker revelations of the Arizal, as we've spoken about in the past, is something referred to as the Soid HaPartzuf, the secret of the Gestalt, the whole that is larger than the sum total of its parts. Moving away from the disintegrated space of Tohu that is associated with the Kabbalah of Rav Moshe Cordovaro, the Ramak, who existed in Sfas prior to the Arizal, and as we've spoken about from Tzadikim, from the Ramam Panau, that there's almost an Isser Shatness in the beginning to learn the Kabbalah of the Ramak and the Ari together, because the Ramak was talking in a place of Tohu, and the Ari was talking in a place of Tikkun. And so the Ramak didn't have the secret of the Partzuf. The Ramak spoke in Nekudos. The Ramak saw different shitos, different ideas, and even though the Ramak really did have that deep understanding, at first glance he didn't. Meaning you have to learn the Arizal in order to go back and learn the Ramak. But the Ramak was the series of individualized points, comes along the Arizal and says all of these points gather together to create a gestalt that is greater than the sum total of themselves, which is the secret of the Partzuf, which is how everything has 10 spheros within itself. There's not only 10 disintegrated spheros, but rather each and everything has its own subset of 10 spheros, yet it manifests in something greater than the sum total of those 10 spheros. The secret of the Partzuf, the secret of interunified experience, the secret of everything working together. And that's exactly what Rav Betzalel Ashkenazi, the Shita Mekubetzes, was doing. Rav Betzalel Ashkenazi, the Shita Mekubetzes, was being makabetz, gathering different shitos of the Rishonim that were not necessarily printed or revealed, and gathering them into one miyuchad dikashita. And so it's possible to say, b'derech drush, that the Arizal also learned the avodah of what he had to reveal by being meshamish of Betzalel Ashkenazi, whose avodah was the shita mekubetzes, to be makabetz the shitos, the work of Yesod, like the work of a likut that's malaket all of the oiris together in order so that they can be revealed properly. After the shita mekubetzes passed away, the Arizal became the Talmud of the Radvaz, who was the Rav of the town of Mitzrayim, until the Arizal was zoichet to what he was zoichet to. The Arizal was zoichet to what he was zoichet to. How was he zoichet to what he was zoichet to? He was zoichet to what he was zoichet to by the deep investiture that he experienced on every level of his experience. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chay, yechida in the Sefer Zohar Kadosh. In the Sefer Zohar Kadosh, the Arizal studied and studied and studied until Eliyahu Navi came to be Megala, Sisrei Torah to him, that a person cannot grasp if they were to live millennia. And after Mitzrayim, the Arizal comes to Sfas Yer HaKodesh. Now, so what we have in the life of the Arizal is Yerushalayim, Mitzrayim, and Sfas. Now, what's the Indian of Sfas? The Indian of Sfas, and we're going to do this bekitzer because there's two other dargim we have to get to in the shir, is that the Indian of Sfas is Safon, it's hidden, it's concealed, it's Safun. As the Pasuk says, Meitzafon tiftach hara, that the negativity emerges from that which appears to be concealed in its northernness. And the Zohar Kadosh in Parsha Shlach says, Marav tuvcha sher tzafanta l'orecha. It's specifically in that place of Mitzafon Tiftach Hara, in those places that the deepest light is going to be revealed. The secret of Marav tuvcha sher tzafanta l'orecha. In the town of Sfas, the Chesed Avram has a cheshbon where he says that the Mispar Katan of Sfas is 21, which corresponds to the Shem Eke, Aleph K, Yud K, which is associated with Bina, which is associated with Yitzchak and everything we're talking about. Now Arizal comes to Sfas to be Megala, that which is Safun, to reveal that which was hidden, through the tzipiyah, through the yearning desire to be tzoypeh, to look towards something. And so what we have is a three-stage process, which we're familiar with by now through the teachings of Rav Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern Shlita. In the beginning, there was infinite light. There was no distinction, no distortion. Then there was a descent into concealment. There was a tzimtzum. There was the creation of minimization. There was a creation of concealment. What's the purpose of that descent into concealment? So that we can go into the concealment and reveal that it's also part of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And it's the Tosefes Kishut, that first it was ayin, it was absolute nothingness, the presence of Or Ein Sof. Then it was ani, it was the tzimtzum, it was concealment and gradations. And then it was ani v'ayin b'vasachas, the inclusion of what appeared to be separate within the unity. And in truth, it is the very thing that drives the unity. And so this three-stage process of the descent away from purified unity into what appears to be disunity for the sake of revealing a more complex form of unity that contains the apparent disunity within itself is reflective in the life of the Arizal himself. He starts off in Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh. Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh can be seen as the Bechina of Or Ein Sof, the place of Kodesh HaKadoshim, Einam and Amida. In that place of purified vision, in that place where everything was redeemed and everything was good. But it wasn't enough for the Arizal to stay in Yerushalayim. He had to descend into Mitzrayim. He had to go into the Memtesh Shari Tumah. To be Megala, the secrets of existence, where? In Mitzrayim itself, on the banks of the Nile River. To uncover the secrets hidden in the place that is most concealing of those secrets. Like the secret of Tzimtzum, that the deepest revelation is the concealment. Ha'elem hu agiloi. And then the Arizal goes from Mitzrayim back to Sfas. A return back to Eretz Yisrael, but now revealing that not only is Eretz Yisrael the place of Yerushalayim where everything is revealed, but it's also in the place of Sfas where everything is concealed. And so the life of the Arizal reflects the very system that he's coming to express. The infinite light prior to constriction, and the expression of all expressible, possible, limited levels. And then the return from those limited levels back up to a place of unity that does not shirk away in fear from the concept of levels, but includes levels within its impossible unity. And we see this in the writings of the Arizal himself. Now, not getting into what would take years to discuss, which is the history of the publication of the Arizal's writings, and which different writings came from which Talmidim, and which Talmidim we were said to be able to learn. What we have is Rav Chaim Vital. We have Rav Chaim Vital, School Seyogan Aleinu, Kol Anosim L'Chaim. We have Rav Chaim Vital, and the other tzaddikim and Talmidim were Mekusher to Rachu. But ultimately, we have Rav Chaim Vital. Every tzaddik has their shamish. Every tzaddik has their Talmud. And the Talmud of the Arizal was Rav Chaim Vital, as well as Maharisarim. And the formation, but if we look at it, if we look at the formation of the writings of the Arizal, you see this as well. Let's look at the Eitz Chaim Kadisha, for example. Eitz Chaim, which Rav Chaim Vital writes in what seems to be a hesped for his Rebbe, the Arizal, as I heard from Rav Moshe Shat Shlita, at the age of 30, bemoaning the fact that Mashiach has not yet arrived, and it's because people have not decided to look at the world with the lens of Pnimiyas Torah. People have not understood what his Rebbe, Rav Yitzchak Luria, was trying to reveal. That's the hesped, that's the hakdama of Eitz Chaim. And the Eitz Chaim is 50 sha'arim. There's 50 sha'arim in the Eitz Chaim, correspondent of what? The Nun Shari Bina. Because in truth, the Kabbalah of the Arizal is teaching us how to live in a world of Bina, how to live in a world where apparent concealment is present, but it's only there to reveal the deepest pleasure that can come from concealment itself. Not only that, but the writings of the Arizal B'derech Klal are referred to as Shmoina Sha'arim, as the 8 gates, the 8 separate svarim. 8 is also the darga of Bina. B'nei Bina Yemei Shmoina, as we're going to see with Hanukkah, which is the Zman of Hiskalis Pnimiyas Torah, which is the light that can only come from the darkness. The Or Aganus that is revealed specifically from within Mitzrayim. So we have the Shmoina Sha'arim, which is from Malchus upwards, the 8th sphere is going to be Bina. We have the Nun Sha'arim of Eitz Chaim, which represents the Nun Shari Bina. And here's the deepest part of it, is that when a person looks at Eitz Chaim Kadisha, when a person looks at the book of Eitz Chaim, ultimately, the book of Eitz Chaim is in truth the joke of the Arizal. The Arizal, like his name Yitzchak, he was coming to reveal laughter in the world. The Az Yimale Shloik Pinu, Az is the gematria of 8. The 8 times Havaya, 8 times 26, which is the gematria of 208, the gematria of Yitzchak Avinu, who's mushrash in the world of Bina, as we've said already, because dinim come from Bina. Yitzchak is Bina. Pnimiyas Torah is Bina. And the entire Eitz Chaim Kadisha is as follows. In the first shar, not the entire Eitz Chaim Kadisha, the particular point I'm trying to point out from the Eitz Chaim Kadisha in this context is as follows. The first shar starts with the purpose behind HaKadosh Baruch Hu's drive towards creation, the presence of the infinite light of the Rebbeinu Shalom, Or Ein Sof. Prior to the Tzimtzum, everything is saturated with Or Ein Sof. The fact that we're able to have that written tells us of what a level we're still dealing with, because if it's written, it's still not the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we're talking about a real darga, a gilui of Or Ein Sof. And as you descend through the sha'arim of Eitz Chaim, as you go from Shar Aleph to Shar Beis to Shar Gimel, Dalet, v'chule, the further down you go, you find yourself getting into murkier and murkier territory of Tzimtzum, and the development of Kalim, and a concealment, measure, limitations, rules, regulations, numbers, boundaries, shvira, catastrophe, klipa, husk, things that appear to be inessential. The process of how to rectify the self from a lower state of self to a gradational growth. The hamshacha of moichin, the secret of mayim nukvin, of tshuka and yearning that comes from below to above. And then until you come to Shar Nun, and what the Arizal is talking about there is the klipos and the concealment and the darkness that we find in this world. The Arizal goes into different countries of origin and the association with the midos ra'os that those particular countries have. And so what Eitz Chaim Kadisha is, it starts off with Or Ein Sof, and it brings you down into the deepest husks of concealment. And this is what I mean when I say the Eitz Chaim is the joke of the Arizal. Because the joke of reality that the Arizal is being megala to us is the joke of Yitzchak, that we descend away from infinite presence of godliness in a revealed way into a world of constriction, into a world of concealment, into a world of tzimtzumim. And a person might think, God forbid, because that's everything that Metzius is telling them, is that the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not found here in the bottom. It's not found in the Nun Shari Tum. It's not found in that place of Gimel Klipos Atamein. It's not found in Shar Nun of Eitz Chaim, where the Ari is now no longer talking about infinite light, not talking about Ak and all of the different lights, but he's talking about the lowest of the low. And that's the setup of the joke. The joke is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present. And then suddenly we're told right away that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not present. And the entire tachlis of the Eitz Chaim Kaddish is to be Megala that Be'emes HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present there as well. And just as he's present at the top, he's present at the bottom. And just as he's present at the bottom, he's present at the top. The Arizal is telling the joke of reality. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends us down here and he says, I have a joke to tell you. There was once an infinite God who sent his people into a place of finitude and concealment. And what's the punchline of the joke? The punchline of the joke is that they came to realize that even there he's found. That's the secret of Yitzchak Avinu. Yitzchak's coming to be Megala to us, the secret that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found even in the lowest place, and any concealment that we thought was real is in truth just a kli to be Megala, a deeper level of unity. That's the Torah of Yitzchak. That's Rav Yitzchak Luria. The light of Yitzchak. The Giloi of Yitzchak, moving from Yerushalayim to Mitzrayim and then to be Zoichet Tesvas, going from the Shar HaAlef of Or Ein Sof into the Shar HaNun, which is the place of the Gimel Klipos, and then returning back to the Or Ein Sof again. Because the Baal HaSulam HaKadosh says that the Iker Giloi of the Arizal, and the Baal HaTanya's Maram is this as well, as Rav Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern Shlita has pointed out in various places, especially in the Yad Kislev Droshos, that there's two types of light in the world. There's Or Yashar, there's a light that descends from above to below, a clarified light without any concealment, movement from general principles down into particulars where I can hold the unity in hand while I descend into disunity. There's the full expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is not such a chiddush to find Hashem there. And then there's the Or Hozer, the reverberating light. What happens when that light that descends from above to below hits the very bottom? It's the Chayshach HaKaful U'Mechupel, it's the limit point. Because what happens then is that in accordance with the intensity and speed through which that light descended above, it reverberates back up like a light off of a mirror, and it shines back upwards even farther. And the whole secret of the Kabbalah, the whole secret of the Arizal, the whole Gilui of the Arizal, in accordance with the tzaddikim of Ashlag and the tzaddikim of the Baal HaSulam and his Talmidim, and this is clear in the Mitler Rebbe as well, is that the Arizal came to be Megala or Hozer. The Arizal came to be Megala, what happens when the light hits the bottom and returns back upwards? And there's not a single shar in Eitz Chaim, says the Baal HaSulam, that can't be read and needs to be read with the klalim of Or Hozer, which is the intensification of light after it descends from above to below, and it reverberates back up from below to above, which is the joke of it all. You thought it was lost. Not only is it not lost, but it's going back to a place even higher than before. And so we can say, and this is B'derech Remez, that Yitzchak, the name Yitzchak, which is the name of Yitzchak, the Sherish of Schok, it's also the name of the Arizal, we said it's Chatzi Kuf. It's the secret of breaking problems in half, or breaking things in half. What Yaakov Avinu learns in this week's Parsha from his father Yitzchak, just as Yitzchak broke things in half, so too, when Yaakov is about to encounter Esav, he learns to break things in half. He separates the camp, because that's how you're mamtik dinim. You chew the maror, you grind down the kataras until it's dak min adak. Like the Gemara in Pei Tesam and Aleph and Shabbos tells us that the way Yitzchak is Megala Geula, brings Mashiach, is by having responsibilities, having. And what's this Chatzi Kuf? What's this splitting of the Kuf? The half of 100 is 50. Meaning to say, the Arizal in the Shorish of Yitzchak is Megala to us, the secret of Chatzi Kuf, that you can learn Eitz Chaim from the beginning to the end, from Or Ein Sof down into Klipa, from revelation down into concealment, and you can think, okay, I have finished, I find myself in Klipa now. But the MS is that a person then has to go back from the bottom of Eitz Chaim, from Shar Nun, back up to Shar Aleph, to be Megala the two sides of the 50, the Chatzi Kuf, 50 and 50, learning Eitz Chaim from the top to the bottom, and learning the secrets of Eitz Chaim from the bottom to the top, to reveal that yes, all revelation descends into concealment, but in truth, all concealment is simply the incubator for a further level of revelation. This is the secret of Yitzchak. This is the secret of the Tischak Liyam Acharon. of being mushrash in that place of that nekuda of yesod, because the entire concept, the entire edifice of Pnimiyas Torah is dependent upon an act of concealment. Like we've said so often, if the surface is good, then there's no need to descend into the depths. Oimek, depth, is the same gematria as gevura, because a person needs eyes of gevura to see that I need the medicine of Pnimiyas Torah. Just like Rashbi came out of the Ma'ara and said, what needs fixing here, so too the Arizal came to Sfas and he said, what needs to be fixed here? That the entire expression of Pnimiyas Torah is dependent with the breakage that precedes it, which is why this Chachma was revealed in such a time. It's not because it was more deserving, it was because it was more desperate. As the Zidichavar Tzadikim would say, that every 3-year-old should be learning Zohar and the Arizal. How can they learn if they're not Tahor? How can you be Tahor and Kadosh without learning this? It's medicine. Baal Shem Tov took the gem of the Arizal and ground it up for the people. But we can't forget the Arizal because of the Baal Shem Tov. We have to take the Arizal and drag him through the Baal Shem Tov, which is what Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern has revealed so powerfully, which is that the hemshech from the Arizal into the Baal Shem Tov is through the Rashash. The Ben Ish Chai has an incredible, incredible secret, and he writes this in the Hakdama to his Sefer, Das Tvuna, a fundamental introductory Sefer to Kabbalah. And in the second Hakdama there, the Ben Ish Chai, in line with the Vilna Gaon, Spusio Ganalenu, and Safra Ditzniusa, says that everything is hinted to the Torah. And where is the Arizal hinted to in the Torah? And he says that the Arizal is hinted to in the Torah by Yitzchak digging the wells. The first well gets covered over. The second well gets covered over. The third well, which is Rechoivos, that finally remains open. The Ben Ish Chai is hinting to the fact that the full culmination of the Arizal was through the Rashash, Rav Shalom Sharabi, Spusi Aganalenu, who is the Makkah Patish of the Arizal, along with the Balasulam and the Leshem Shva V'Chalema. But that place of Rechovos is referring to the Hakdam of Rechovos Anar. But be that as it may, the shirish of the Arizal in the Torah is the digging of the wells and the tolerating the difficulty and the passive resistance in the face of difficulty. And that's what we encounter in the system of the Arizal, Tzimtzum and Gilui, He'elem and Gilui, Shvira and Binyan. The entire system of the Arizal, which is built on Shvira and Tikkun, don't think that Shvira and Tikkun are two separate things. The process of rectification is the process of minimization. The concealment is the Tikkun. The levushim, the tikkunim, all of those things are simply ways in which we create vessels in which we can receive an unbearable light of infinitude in a measured way so that we can then reveal the joke at the heart of that expression, which is that what we thought was measured is not really measured. The Rebbe says, Rav Yitzchak Morgenstern Shlita, in an incredible mimer in the second volume on the biur of Rechovos Anar that they printed, he explains, and this is on Daf 991 in the second volume of the biur on Rechovos Anar, but just this expression in Perek Beis that the Iker Chiddush of the Arizal over the Ramak was that the Arizal came to be Megala, the value of this worldly experience and the descent away from the heights over and above the experience of being in the heights. Because being above is one thing, but without descending below in order to reveal that below is also included within above, then a person hasn't revealed the joke of it all. Then a person hasn't revealed the schoik at the heart of it. And again, all of Hasidus is based upon the Torah of the Arizal. There's a famous Maisa that there was a child who was sick, and they brought the Baal Shem Tov in to try and give the child a bracha, and the Baal Shem Tov pointed to the child, and he says, "Who am I?" And the child said, "I know who you are, you're the Arizal." And the Baal Shem Tov laughed, and he walked out, and he said, "He'll be fine." Because be'emes, we need to return to the Arizal. We need to draw the prate pratim of the Arizal down into the klolus of the Baal Shem Tov so that we can keep telling the joke over and over, because the joke of the Ari is that what appears to be concealed is in truth a sight of revelation. Ha'elem hu agiloi. The tzimtzum is a giloi. Kahadin kamsa de levushim minei ubei. Like the locust, it's minei ubei. It comes from within itself. The concealment comes from within itself. This could only be learned in Mitzrayim. There's a lot to say. There's a lot more to say. But there's a teaching from the Baal HaSulam discussing why the yahrzeit of the Arizal is on Hey Ba'av. Again, Hey Ba'av, the Hey in the Aleph Beis, which is the Os of Bina, which is what the Arizal's Giloi corresponds to. and Hey Ba'av, which is the refuah koydem hamaka of the shvira, of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, to the extent that the Baal Sulam says that by the Arizal, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe says this as well, by the Tzaddikim, the Beis Hamikdash was still built. You went in to learn by the Arizal, you were experiencing Beis Hamikdash. The tikkunim, the schoik of the Arizal, walking around, revealing rectifications for different things, seeing the faces of people, understanding the pain of another human being, understanding why their heartbeat is high. The willingness to be metayel within the am, within the klal. A tzaddik like the Arizal to be yored into Mitzrayim, to pick people up, like Yosef a tzaddik who goes down in order to bring the brothers back up afterwards as well. And the Baal Sulam writes as follows. The Baal Sulam writes with regards to the yahrzeit of the Arizal, and after describing that the Arizal is completely rooted in the secret of or Hozer, says as follows: Kasuv Yoshev b'shamayim Yitzchak. He who sits in heaven and laughs with a sin. And we know the Arizal says that Tzadi of Yitzchak will be nisapech to a sin, which is the schoik of Yitzchak, lasid lavo. And what does this mean? Yoshev b'shamayim Yitzchak. How is this associated with the Arizal? Kasher adam oile b'darga. When a person ascends a level, hanivchan li Yoshev b'shamayim, and I think I have reached the apex. I consider myself as having ascended to Shamayim, thinking that I've finished with the work. Az Yitzchak. At that point, the person has to learn how to laugh. Why? Because now he's looking at himself and realizing that in relationship to who I was, this is insane. I never thought I could be here. And on the same level, in relationship to who I can be, is also I can laugh at it. The laughter of the Arizal's Torah is that it reveals to us over and over how I could possibly perceive the previous moment to be concealment. It starts with concealment, and I find revelation, and then I look back on that previous concealment and I say, how could it have been that I thought it was concealment? It was a joke all along. Rav Yitzchak Isaac Mehamel, Schusig and Alina writes that the three gradations of the revelation of Pnimius HaTorah, Sisrei Torah throughout history were the Ramak, the Arizal, and the Baal Shem Tov, meaning the Ramak includes everything that came before the Ramak. The Arizal is between the Ramak up to and including the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov is what follows. So it's Ramak, Ari, and Baal Shem Tov. And Rav Yitzchak Isaac Mehamel, the Talmud Mufak of the Alter Rebbe, one of the Talmud Mufakim says as follows: the Kabbalah of the Ramak is Hishtalshlus. It's the unfolding of worlds. The Kabbalah of the Arizal is halbasha, in garments, concealing valves that reveal, garments of light, identifying the fact that the kalim, the vessels themselves, are ore, the difficulty itself is growth. And then there's the Kabbalah of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, which Be'ezras Hashem will get into when we discuss Yitzchak in the lens of the Baal Shem Tov, which is the secret of Hashra'ah, of presence. And so again, we see that the Arizal is teaching us the secrets of Halbasha, how concealment is revelation, and teaching us mamish how to laugh, Be'ezras Hashem.